Just about 25 minutes after the hour of 7 o'clock, welcome back to the Now Morning Show. Now on Monday, people awoke to the news that a newborn baby was found alive in a garbage bag in one of the hallways at the San Fernando General Hospital. The child was taken to be medically examined and is said to be healthy. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway. And so today we are going to be looking at some possible solutions to something like this. For example, could the baby have been given up for adoption or even placed in foster care? Well, with me is the adoption manager at the Children's Authority, Miss Renee Neptune. Miss Neptune, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us on Now.
Hi, good morning. Thank you all for having me this morning to discuss this topic with our viewers.
Of course, we definitely had to have you in, especially given what we saw on Monday. Now, first of all,
Yeah.
there have been calls from some sectors of the society saying that maybe the child could have been given up for adoption, maybe the infant, in fact, could have been placed in foster care. I mean, what is adoption, and then what is the difference from adoption to foster care?
Right. So I would start by stating what is adoption. And adoption is it's a legal process, right? It is the transfer of parental rights and responsibilities. Both parents, they relinquish their parental rights and responsibilities, and that will now be transferred to persons who want to adopt this child, what we call the adopters. So adoption, it is permanent when it is granted by the courts. It's not granted by Children's Authority. We process the adoption application, but the final process is granted by the court. And once that is granted, that child becomes a permanent member of that family. The child can inherit the parents' belongings. They have a right to inheritance, and it provides a child with a sense of permanence and belonging as they are now part of that, what we call a forever family.
Yes.
And I would say that it differs from foster care in that foster care is temporary. So there are different types of foster care, whether it be long-term or short-term foster care. However, adoption is the permanent option.
Right. And so for a situation like this, Miss Neptune, as the child is a newborn baby, is there a way to say which one of the processes would have been easier, whether it is the parent could have probably given up the child for adoption at that stage, or if foster care would have been a better option?
Right. So we do provide information on both processes. Persons can come into us, they can contact us, and we will explain what is the adoption process, what is the foster care process. So foster care is a separate unit, and they can be guided to foster care. So we will speak to the birth parent or parents. We will explore what social challenges they may be facing, whether it be financial, emotional, let's say mental, or even physical challenges. And based on what they inform us of, we will decide, okay, are you all ready to place a child for adoption? Because once you place a child for adoption, it is a permanent decision. Whereas if you decide to go for foster care, we will help you in terms of, providing that support for you, providing any types of reintegration, any types of referral, any assistance you may need as you try to get back on your feet and then be able to receive your child into your care,
Of
right?
course.
So it all depends on what is the situation being experienced by these birth parents and what may be the best option in their eyes for their child. It's always in the best interest of the child, so we explore all possible options with them.
So just to be clear, if a parent is ever thinking about giving up their child for adoption or placing the child in foster care, the first process is to come to the Children's Authority, or do they have other options as well?
Right. So they can come to the Children's Authority. They can feel free to walk into any of our offices, either in Chaguanas or in Port of Spain. They can call our hotline at 996 or 800 2014. In the case of where a birth parent may be in the hospital, they can inform a doctor, a nurse, a medical social worker. They can inform a police officer. They can contact Childline, and all that information will come to our registry unit, and it will be dealt with in a professional, a confidential manner by the Children's Authority.
Right. And in terms of the foster care, I know that there are different types of, I would say maybe different types of foster care, if you will, in
Right.
terms of how long the child can stay in the system. How
Yeah.
does that work?
So I would not really want to get too much into foster care because we are two different sets of units. We're separate and apart from each other. However, again, it will be discussed with the birth parents, I guess, how long, what challenges they're facing, what may be the plan in terms of how long will this child be in foster care? What is the plan in terms of moving forward, in terms of reintegration? So while the child is in foster care, there may be an aspect, where they can visit the child, they can continue to build that bond while they are working on themselves or while they are, building their lives to be able to be reintegrated with this child, to have this child in their care.
Of course. And while the parent looks at, let's say, the adoption process, how long does it take? So, for example, the parent will come to the Children's Authority. How long before the process ends and then the child can go to a safe home?
Right. So we do not place timelines on the adoption process, whether it be persons applying for adoption or persons wanting to give a child up for adoption, but we do act on the matter as urgently. We treat it as an urgent matter. So let's say a birth parent wants to give up a child for adoption, we urge them to come into us as soon as possible, as soon as okay, I may not have the support, I may not have the family support, I may not have the finances or stable home to care for this child. Come into us and we follow up with you throughout the process, throughout your pregnancy. We inform the medical social workers, we liaise with the nurses, the doctors, right? We An important part of our process is obtaining consent from the birth parents. So even after they give birth, we do keep in contact with them to see, okay, are you still certain that you want to place your child for adoption? Because the main goal of the authority is to keep families together, right? But if they know they are certain and they are unable to care for this child, we try to act on the matter as soon as possible. We have to ensure that the child is healthy. We get the child freed for adoption. We do our legal processes through the court. We ensure that everything is, up to par. I cannot give a time frame, but we do act on it as soon as possible because we want that child to be placed with a safe, loving, caring family as soon as.
So what I'm also hearing as well is that adoption takes place at certain, it can take place rather at certain ages. So it doesn't always have to be a newborn, but it can be, let's say, an infant. Or is there a cap on, the age that a child can be adopted?
Right. So yes, there is a cap. The cutoff age for adoption is under 18. So once you're 18, according to the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, you're considered to be an adult, right? So we do have a lot of persons who want babies, who want infants, but we do have older children, let's say in our homes or what we know as the community residences, who are also in need of a safe, loving, caring home. So we do urge persons who may be wanting to apply for adoption that you can also increase the age range of a child that you would like to have placed in your care. So let's say the average age range persons want a baby, a child that they can nurture, right? So we do encourage persons, once you are able to, let's say a child that's 9, 10, 11, even older, we do encourage persons to apply for older children if they are able to, because these children also need a loving home. Persons can also apply for a sibling group. So we have never split up a sibling group within adoption. We've had sibling groups of up to 4 children adopted. So we do encourage persons, if you're also interested in adopting a sibling group, to state that to us.
Of course. And you would have mentioned earlier, sometimes the parents may realize that they could no longer support this child as much as they want to. Where does the child go while the parent or while the adoption process has started?
Right. So once we receive consent from the parents, and a consent is an important part of our process, means that they would have relinquished their parental rights and responsibilities, and the child is now in the care and control of the Children's Authority. So in the interim, while we are doing our legal processes and matching this child with approved persons, that child can either be in temporary foster care or in a community residence where the adoption unit, we monitor these children every month. Let's say their social, developmental, medical milestones. They are taken for their immunizations. We ensure that they're enrolled in school. They're followed up monthly by our adoption committee. So those are the placements in the interim before they are placed with a forever family.
Of course. Now, you would have mentioned consent as being a very important part of the process. And so I'm wondering what kind of situations you would have seen, because, for example, there may be a child that is obviously crying out for help or who needs help, but the parent may not want to relinquish their duties and their responsibilities. Is it okay for the family to get involved in that point, or for some other person who believes that they can take care of the child, can they start an adoption process at that point?
Right. So we do run into situations like these, even with children in the community residences. And sometimes this is why we do not have a big pool of children readily available for adoption, where both parents, sometimes they may not be active in the child's life. but they don't want to relinquish their parental consent. And this is also why we do not put a time frame on the processing of adoption cases, because we have to try to get that consent. If we cannot get that consent, we have to place ads in the newspaper. We have to try as best as possible to engage that birth parent, because they are the biological parent. They have rights for this child, right? Um, we try all these things, we cannot find them, or they are withholding consent unreasonably, they're incapable of giving consent. Our Adoption Act, there is a section within the act that states that the court, it is at the discretion of the court. The court can dispense with the parent's consent, and some of the grounds are unreasonably withholding consent, they've abandoned, abused, neglected the child. But we also have to prove to the court that we did try to locate these birth parents, or that these birth parents, they have not been a part of the child's life. And we would now like that, to move forward with placing this child with a family so they can get the best opportunities in life, right? But it is to the discretion of the court.
Right. And the children that are that have been placed up for adoption, is it that they are found in the orphanages and the community residences that you would have mentioned?
Correct. So right now we do not have a big pool of children readily available for adoption. And again, it leads back to maybe some of the parents not wanting to relinquish their parental rights. So a lot of the children, sometimes they are in the community residences, or a birth parent or parents may come to us and say that, okay, we do not have the support, we do not have the means to care for this child, we want to place this child for adoption. Or let's say there's a child in the hospital that has been abandoned, and the hospital would have referred that child to us. And upon concluding our investigations, we determined, okay, the next best option for this child is to be placed for adoption. And
Right.
there is also another option in terms of, let's say, there's a child within a family. So you know how our society is. We may be caring for a child for a number of years. The birth parents are no longer able to care for that child, or they would have given this child to us to take care of. We can also seek to finalize and formalize that placement of that child within that home legally by adoption. So
Of
persons
course.
who are in that situation, they can also come to us and we can discuss with them what the process will be like to legally formalize that process of adoption.
Right. And as we are legally formalizing the process, I also want to know on the flip side, for a parent or parents who are thinking of adopting, is there a sort of criteria that they must abide by?
So no, there's no judgment, there's no sort of set criteria. We interview these birth parents, we hear their side of the story as well, because it may be a bit emotional for them in terms of relinquishing their parental rights. We do ask them, feel free to come into us, feel free to discuss with us. There's sometimes a stigma attached to adoption, where persons may be like, I don't want to give my child up for adoption. Person's going to say, I can't care for my child. But it is a very selfless act. We do ask persons to come in, work with a form of ID. We take your address, your contact information, and everyone is welcome to come in, whether you can't care for your child, whether you want to adopt a child, to come into us. There's for persons who want to adopt a child, there may be a criteria that we go through when we conduct in our home study reports. But for birth parents, no, there's no judgment, no stigma attached. Please feel free to come in to us.
So that was the question I was actually asking. For people who want to adopt, is there certain criteria?
Right,
So, for example, is there a salary
right.
requirement? Is it supposed to be a
Yeah,
nuclear family? Can a
right.
single person adopt?
Yeah,
Can an older person adopt? What is the criteria for people like that?
right. Sure, no problem. So yes, there are certain criteria. So a single person can adopt, a married couple can adopt, and there are two different types of application forms that they would complete when they're submitting to us. What we have to do is a thorough psychosocial process, whereby we have to conduct our interviews. They have to provide us with medicals, and we provide this information to them during their interviews. Financial information, persons in the home, we have to get a background check. All these things are part of the process to ensure that this is a forever placement. This is the child, this is going to be a child's new home. We have to ensure that the persons we're placing this child with and the environment we're placing them with is one that is stable, loving, caring. So there are certain requirements to be met. There's no age range or no age, a cutoff age limit for persons who want to adopt right now, but it is also to the discretion. All these things that we have discussed, the criteria, is to the discretion of our adoption committee.
Right. And while, of course, you would have mentioned that there's a small pool right now of children to be adopted, do you see a difficulty with people wanting to adopt older children as opposed to, newborns or toddlers?
Yes, a lot of persons, or I should say the most of our persons who have been approved or went through our adoption process, who are approved and placed on our list, um, about 98% of them really do want a baby. They want a toddler. They want a child that they could nurture and, raise as their own. Um, Hardly we would get persons who want older children. So when we get persons who want older children, we're really grateful because we do have some older children who are also in need of a loving, caring home, children who are in community residences who may be older, and they are children who also deserve that loving, caring home. So we do experience that challenge, as well as that is why sometimes there may be a waiting period because everyone wants a baby. Not much persons want an older child. So I would take this opportunity again to invite persons, if you're submitting an application to us, also consider adopting an older child.
Of course. And while we are on the topic of adoption and foster care, does the Children's Authority also take into consideration surrogacy as well?
No, so the surrogacy, we do not have laws for those in Trinidad and Tobago. However, some persons may have it completed outside of Trinidad and Tobago. They may want to have an adoption process finalized within the country. We do entertain that, but there are no laws for those within Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, Ms. Neptune, let me thank you so much for joining us. And I know that there are some people who are listening who may want more information. Can you share any numbers or any social media handles and
Sure,
that they can get in contact with the Children's Authority?
sure. No problem. If they want to contact the Children's Authority, and as we always say, child protection is everyone's business, so they are free to contact our hotlines at 996 or 800 2014. They can also contact the adoption unit via email at adoption@ttchildren.org. You can feel free to walk into our offices located in Chaguanas or in Port of Spain. And I'd also take the time now to say that within the upcoming month, there is our foster care and adoption awareness month. And the public will be seeing a lot more of us in terms as doing public sensitizations. The adoption unit wants to have more, of a presence within the communities, the hospitals, health centers, where persons can feel safe, and knowing that it is a confidential process. They can trust us to have that process done without any judgment, without any stigma. So be sure to look out for us from the month of September and ongoing.
Ms. Neptune, thank you so much for joining us on the Now Morning Show and just sharing some information.
No
I
problem.
feel as if we just scratched the surface, so I'm hoping that we can have you in again just to delve in the conversation a bit deeper next time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course, have a good one. And that was Miss Renee Neptune, the adoption manager at the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, just talking about adoption, Rocus, adoption and foster care.